Alright, and welcome Pirate Crew to this new series. Today we're going to be starting the first part of our new High Tabletop series that we're going to start doing about every 3 months. So today we are working on Janus Drake from the new Blackstone Fortress game from Games Workshop. And I wanted really quickly to talk about this just because we're doing something kind of new here. So what we're going to be doing here is a quick study of this Janus Drake illustration. And so as you can see up at the top, we have the palettes for the red cloth, the blue cloth, and the purple cloth, which are going to be the focus of this tutorial. And what can we see from doing this study? What we can see is our brightest tones and our darkest tones for the red and blue cloth are our most saturated, whereas the middle tones are more neutral, they're more grayed out. And so what we can do is we can utilize this with the painting in order to really make it feel very dark and atmospheric and really bring the punch to both our shadows and our highlights. We can also make the colors feel much more red, even though they're not red, and much more blue, even though they're not a true blue. And with that being said, let's go ahead and hop into the palette. Here's our 3 colors. Of course, we are starting with fuchsia, and then we're grabbing a little bit of our hull red and mixing those two together just to kind of make that tone a little bit more neutral. Thinning it down with just a touch of water. Next, we're grabbing some black here. This is making it more neutral in essentially a little bit of a different way. Black is very neutral on its own, kind of takes away a lot of colors because it kind of sucks it in and absorbs all the colors. And then the whole red is neutral because it has a little bit of green and a little bit of blue in it, just kind of make it more neutral. And then we're adding some white because we want to bring those neutral colors up into that kind of pastel range. Now we're taking this color, it's kind of thinned down to a medium layer, and we are pushing that tone into the shadow area. So we're wanting to leave a little bit of the lighter white that was there to begin with. We also want to start to create opacity in the shadows. And so here we are coming over it a couple of times, pretty much the exact same thing. As you can see here, we're going to slowly start to add more hull red and black into this mix and continue pushing it into the shadows until we get that really, really nice dark. We're actually going to end with nightshade purple. We really want those shadows to be very, very dark so that we create this really nice atmosphere. And again, more of the same, more hull red, more nightshade purple, and continuing to push into the shadows. If you see the highlights, you can see that some of that white from the priming is still kind of pushing its way up through that initial tone. Now we're switching into more of kind of a gentle glazing technique. And now we're hitting it with pure nightshade black. And then one more time. We really want those shadows to be nice and deep. A lot of times the feedback that I've been giving lately is that people are kind of nervous to get their models dark enough. And so now we are coming in with, I would say, a light layer of this pure fuchsia, and we are just kind of pushing that around in that upper area till we get that bead to rest where we want it. And hitting it again. And this final layer is going to be a heavier base coat. We are really just kind of marking that where we want it. The final thing that we're going to do here is just a couple of glazes of blood red that we started with. We want to give it a little bit of warmth, but essentially this piece is so cool already that even though this blood red is kind of a cool red, in relationship to the rest of the colors that are going on, it will actually make it feel like it's a little bit more of a warm red, and it only takes a couple of glazes here to really get it where we want. We really want the majority of it to be that fuchsia color. And so there is the final cleaned up result of the red cloak there. As you can see, it does feel very, very red, even though it's that lighter, it's not quite pink, but it's kind of a magenta tone. Then we're going to hop right into our next subject for this video, which is these blue trousers. And I'm going to pull up the reference image here really, really quickly. And as you can see, we are trying to go for this kind of light gray blue kind of tone. And so we're going to hop over the palette and start to hunt for it. And essentially what we are doing here is we are starting with a kind of a darker neutral tone, adding just a touch of this Prussian blue. And I very quickly found out that I added too much Prussian blue. And the way that I found that out was kind of, I thought that I did initially, and then I added some white, and that made it even more evident. And we can tell that because when we add the white, it still feels like a very, very true blue, and we want to make it a bit more neutral. So we're adding in a little bit more of this gray at a time until we get to where we are going. And eventually I actually exhaust my little pile of slate blue there, and I'm just checking it on my finger, and it's not enough yet. So we're adding a little bit more into that mix. We add some water finally because we are going to start to take this color to the miniature. And so with this one, we're going to start with a much more thin glazing technique. I would say it's about a medium glaze or so. And essentially we're putting into practice the tinting because we really want those highlights and shadows to kind of push their way through. This is the third tint with this particular tone. As you can see, it really does have a nice saturation, but it's actually pretty gray. As you guys saw when we were over at the palette, when we put it on our thumb, it's pretty gray, but when it goes onto the miniature, it feels like a very, very nice kind of blue tone. So now we're going to start to add some Prussian blue into this mix, and we're going to start to create our shadows. Just continuing, now we're kind of doing this push-pulling technique, just with the glaze of that darker blue. We are wanting to push it up into there, and then we create the shadow in the fold right there, and then we push the rest of it into the shadows on this other area. Just doing the same. I wanted to make sure that I was showing you guys much more of the process with these tutorials. So now we've darkened it up a bit, and we are just going to continue to attack it. With this one I added a bit more Prussian blue, but I also added a touch of nightshade purple. Okay, and so I decided that we had gained enough shadow contrast, and so what I'm going to do now is I have ultramarine blue, and I mixed it with the original mix about 50-50, and what we're going to do is we are going to start to highlight this. And this is I really wanted to do this just so that I could really accent the difference between warm and cool whites. Ultramarine blue is a warm blue, and as you can see, it contrasts the cool blue of the Prussian blue and even the neutral blue quite wonderfully. So not only are we manipulating a value contrast, meaning dark and light, we're also taking advantage of a warm-cold contrast, and then on top of that we're taking care of a desaturated versus saturated contrast. And so now we are working in here with pure ultramarine blue very, very lightly. We're probably just at kind of a medium to heavy glaze consistency here, and we're just putting on those final coats. So now there's this little bit of detail. I wanted to show you guys this. I put pure nightshade purple on the brush, and I got it to kind of a medium layer consistency, and I really want it to flow off of the brush. And when I'm telling you guys to line your miniatures to practice, keeping control of the brush, this is why. This is kind of the practical application after doing all of that intricate, shadow work to separate the elements and why it's important. So, and what I did here is I took a little bit of our neutral color and I added just a touch of white to it. We don't want this to be saturated because this is in a shadow zone. We want it to be very desaturated. And if we actually mark this on top of our highlight, it would actually kind of appear to be a middle gray. But because this zone is so dark, it feels much lighter. And so essentially we're just being very, very careful with the tip of our brush, and we are painting these very, very thin lines. And right there I made just a touch of a mistake, and I'm deciding whether or not I want to continue or fix it. And I'm just going to go ahead and continue, and I fix it off screen. Essentially I just go back with the black and just kind of touch that up very, very quickly. But as you can see, very, very quick result. Just have to practice that fine motor control. The final thing that we are doing today is we are working on these kind of purple-blue trousers, and I'm glazing with a violet from Vallejo Model Color with quite a lot of Nightshade black in it. And here I mixed in even a little bit more just to make it more neutral. It was a bit too saturated for my liking, and so I dulled it down just a touch. And then we're just going to start to add more Nightshade Purple to that mix and increase the shadow areas. I'm at a heavy glaze consistency here. I want to affect a change, but I don't want it to be so significant that I can't recover easily from it. And essentially I continue until I hit pure Nightshade Black. Sometimes the sword gets in the way, and even then, as you saw, I move the model so that the brush can get by. I do have to move the brush a touch, but not too much. And then here we are coming in with our original blue mix, and we are starting to paint on these very, very thin lines. They're actually a touch thicker than the lines that we were painting on the blue cloak, but they're in a rather difficult position. So we're taking very, very great care, and we are just pulling these straight lines. And you always want to pull a straight line when you are painting a miniature. And I would highly, highly suggest, if this is something that intimidates you, to practice doing this on a piece of paper or even on your thumb, just so that you get used to pulling a straight line, and do a lot of these in parallel to each other, because the next one is kind of going to let you know if you pull one that's kind of curved, the next one can be straighter just because you have kind of a point of reference as to what that curve is. So here I mixed a little bit of white into that. I'm just hitting these peak points just so that even these stripes have volume. They have highlights and shadows going on. And it's not a very big increase. It's, maybe just a touch of white. And so then I added just a touch more of white, and what we're going to do is I'm going to paint very, very thin lines along the side here. And the reason is that it just adds that extra little bit of pattern to it, and it really brings them out a little bit more. This is completely optional, to be completely honest. I thought that it did a nice job at bringing them out a little bit more, but again, it's a very, very difficult thing to do, so I'll leave this one up to you. And so I really hope that you have enjoyed these 3 different sections of cloth and kind of this discussion around reserving saturation until the very, very end. I really, really enjoyed painting this hero for you guys, and I really hope that you guys learned quite a bit by watching this. If you have any questions at all, I would love to hear them. Thank you so much for your support. It really makes a massive difference to us, and I hope you guys have a fantastic day. Happy painting! Bye.